Dialing in from Brooklyn in the US today is Chris Speed. Chris is a nutritional scientist, dietitian. He's got a background in biochemistry, and we're talking vitamin K2. Did you know the daily recommendations for vitamin K are based on K1? Here's a big one for you. 97% of Western populations, both children and adults, are deficient in this essential nutrient. That's a real risk for building bones and a functioning cardiovascular system. Let's chat why.
Welcome to the Body Science Podcast, bringing you everything you need, want, and should know about health, fitness, nutrition, and training. As always, the information contained in this podcast is for the information purposes only and is not designed to diagnose or be prescriptive to treat, prevent, or manage any injury, disease, or other health-related condition.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Triandrabol. Feel invigorated and perform at your best in and out of the gym with Triandrabol Test. Ideal for anyone looking to naturally increase testosterone levels to help you train harder, improve strength, reduce body fat, and boost libido. One of the most potent formulations on the market, loaded with high-quality therapeutic ingredients, Triandrabol is for both men and women wanting to improve their physique.
Welcome to another week at Body Science HQ, the home of Fit, Happy and Healthy. This week we have someone really exciting to talk to, Chris Speed, nutritional scientist, dietitian with a background in nutritional biochemistry. You might be saying, who cares? This guy has done some great stuff with product development, research opportunities, and massive in the messaging in traditional health back in the States. He's worked with companies such as Barlean's Organic Oils, Minami Nutrition, PepsiCo, we've all heard of them, Unilever, Nestle, DuPont. So, Chris, let's not muck around. You are an expert on an ingredient called MENQ7K2, which is a version of vitamin K2. A lot of people out there in this fitness world that we live in will be going, who cares? Why do we need to know about vitamin K2?
Well, I think it's important to get right what you're actually talking about. People lump both K1 and K2 into the same basket, and both are important. But for athletes, it really does appear that the K2, the menaquinone family of vitamin K, that appears to be the one that provides and exerts most of the benefits that we're seeing, either from anecdotal recollection and all the way through to really deep, hardcore science. Has been shown to be, highly efficacious. So it's first, are you taking K1, which is in a lot of multivitamins? That's great for coagulation. It's a lot. You're more likely to get that in your diet anyway. It's really K2 that's the problem. Most of us walking around the streets are highly deficient in vitamin K2 because it's so extremely difficult to get it in our diet. So for any athlete that's wanting to prepare themselves in training, set themselves up for the best train sessions, to exert their highest VO2 max, to have the greatest recovery, there's a lot of underpinning reasons why K2 really is a part of the nutrition solution. And it really is a very exciting nutrient for those who are exercising at a very high level, or even not. If you're starting to get older and you're a little bit concerned about the effects of exercising on your body, which we'll go into more detail, K2 can be really one of those important solutions. It typically goes beyond just bone strength and agility, but also looks at things like energy levels. So are you actually able to exert the best when you're performing as an athlete? And although the research is definitely less clear around this, and there's limited things we could say about the nutrients, there's a great deal that we are starting to be aware of.
So when we're talking vitamin K2, we're talking about cardiovascular and bone support, and you're now putting in recovery and energy.
Exactly, yeah. And so what actually happens is, MENQ7K2 is the ingredient that we use, which is the only K2 ingredient that's actually been underpinned by all the research that exists on K2. So without us doing the research that we have on our form of K2, we wouldn't be able to say to you it's safe and that it actually exerts those bone protecting and arterial support the way we now know vitamin K2 does.
And we're talking about 22 research projects?
Yeah, approximately 20 studies and growing. And another ingredient manufacturers of K2 are also starting to use their own research to get claims on products. In certain countries, we can say this supports arterial health. In some countries,
do you want to explain what that is? Like, what is arterial health?
Yeah, so our arteries are pivotal to our cardiovascular system, and for an athlete, having clear arteries that aren't blocked is an important thing. Too many athletes assume that because they are very fit, that they don't need to necessarily worry about their cardiovascular system. Well, yes, exercise is really important to actually have a very healthy cardiovascular system, but there are a lot of incidences of cardiovascular disease in athletes. It's assumed that as many as 1 in 10,000 and 1 in 40,000 have immediate acute heart attacks and so forth. And it's amazing how many people can remember a famous athlete who literally had a myocardial infarction and died. And you would think, wow, how could this be the case? Well, it's not, with vitamin K2 and other excellent nutrition, we could be cleaning the arteries. And what K2 does is, as we get older, we have a preponderance to want to put calcium into our arteries. Mm-hmm. And it tends to line and start what we call an atherosclerotic lesion, or a blockage of your arteries. With more calcium on the atherosclerotic lesion, it literally impedes blood flow. And of course, to support the biggest muscle in your body, your heart, to support all the key organs, and liver being a really important one, your heart, and so forth, having clear open arteries is extremely important for that endurance athlete. And that's why K2 really is an important agent. And it's actually the only agent, pharmaceutical not, to actually show reversal of arterial stiffness, especially in postmenopausal women.
And that study was a long study too, 3 years, is that right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
That study was a 3-year study. It wasn't a 7-day,
Correct.
Let's have a look and clap our hands.
Yeah, exactly. So it's it's a 3-year study that is pretty significant. There's also the Rotterdam Study that actually showed that individuals who had high levels of K2, not K1, mm-hmm. they actually had lower risks of cardiovascular disease by about 50%.
50%.
By about 50%. And
wow.
Actually a prospect cohort study in 2009 really gave an incredible feedback to manufacturers and people who want to bring K2 to the masses, like Body Science, and actually showed that for every 10 micrograms, which is a very small amount, and a lot of brands have about 20 to say 50 micrograms, for every 10 micrograms, you're actually reducing negative coronary events, cardiovascular disease, by about 9%. So the vast majority of products on the marketplace who have the MENQ7 form of K2 can really start making some bold claims when they're allowed to about how that product can really further reduce the calcification of the arteries, which is obviously not a good thing.
Wow, live longer with Triandrobol, that's what I say. So
that's right.
Just arterial stiffness, okay, if I've got a stiff artery, which a lot of people do as they age, what does that mean when MENQ7 K2 starts being supplemented? What actually happens with that calcium or that calcification?
Well, what it does is it literally stops the artery, which if you envisaged as a tube, from being flexible. And what that actually does is it actually sends what they call a high pulse wave velocity. It's more likely to cause
high pulse
damage.
Wave velocity. What's that?
Yeah, it's an electrocardiogram terminology that cardiologists would talk about, and it literally shows how easy is the blood flowing from your heart to vital organs in your body.
Yep.
And when you have this high pulse wave velocity, in fact, you can actually buy machines now that you put your finger in, and it can actually give you some understanding of of the shape of your arteries. It actually shows that these are stiffer. And unfortunately, due to the vitamin K2 deficiency in our society all through the world, and especially as even in our younger years, it's not just for older people, this stiffness leads to the development of atherosclerosis and just ultimate damage, wear and tear of your cardiovascular system. What we want is really supple tubing, essentially, which is like your artery, that allows blood to flow very, very easily to get to your vital organs, your muscles, and your heart, so that you can perform to your maximum as an athlete and someone who's regularly involved in exercise.
So if I'm supplementing MENQ7 K2, is it just disappearing? What's happening with that calcification?
Yeah, it's in certain trials that are specifically looked at women, and some of them in a postmenopausal state. What it actually literally shows is, yes, the calcium is being removed. What vitamin K2 does is it acts as the director in the human body to drive calcium where it shouldn't be, i.e. in the arterial walls, and actually where it should be. And if you think about it, obviously the bone and teeth are extremely important, and they are big stores, and specifically the long bones in our body. There are certain parts there that, whether it's the osteoblast and cast, that actually stores a lot of the calcium to regenerate really strong bones, and that's obviously really important. But calcium's also involved in exercise, in muscle contractions. And although there is limited evidence to suggest this, having more free calcium may be better for certain athletes who are wanting to have as much calcium to be soaked up by the muscle to then contract. And if you think about it, your heart is the biggest muscle, so it makes sense that there should be calcium around that's not filling up the arteries, but making sure the muscle works like any muscle in your body. And obviously at the same time, you're protecting and promoting optimal bone health.
And can we talk more about that? Why is it protecting bone health?
It's important for bone health because osteoporosis and osteoporotic tendencies in our society are on the rise. Unfortunately, the rates of osteoporosis are increasing. And when we put a value to it beyond just the fact that it's not nice to have broken bones, i.e. that the cost to society, where people who fall and break their hip, or if you're a performing athlete, taking you off the scene for a certain amount of time, a lot of people really, obviously need to have optimal bone health and support for those reasons. So now more than ever, and as we are understanding the nutrition science, it's a real structure function concept. If we simply don't have K2 in our body, we simply don't drive calcium where we need it to be, which is to maintain not just strong bones, but bones that are able to bend a little bit and still be strong. And that's the other part of bone health that we typically think that a very hard bone is good. Well, sometimes hard bones can fracture easily, so that there needs to be some subtlety there. And the way in which the calcium is brought into the bone, especially when it's directed by vitamin K2, is a really, really, really important thing. Now, what it does, and this is really why vitamin K2 is a really exciting industry, is what we know the vitamin K2 does is it actually activates specific proteins. Now, one of them is called osteocalcium. It's that protein, when it's activated by vitamin K2, that leads to stronger bones. That protein's one of its sole responsibilities is to literally direct calcium, take it from arterial lining where there's stiffness being occurred, and driving it into certain parts of the body where we do need them. There are other proteins that are more related to literally cleaning our arteries. And the question you alluded to was, are you literally taking calcium away? That's exactly what we're doing. And that's actually a complicated protein called matrix GLA protein, or just MGP for short. It's another protein in our body, and when K2 activates that protein, it then becomes literally almost like a cleaning agent, and it ensures that the calcium is going where it should be and hopefully where it's not.
Wow, interesting. So if I don't want to supplement vitamin K2, what have I got to eat a day? Like, there's a lot of people out there that say we shouldn't supplement, we shouldn't do this, and fair enough, like each to their own, but I'm a believer. Obviously, I've got a supplement company, so I'm a believer in supplementing. How much? Yeah. What have you got? Some foods there we need to eat?
Yeah, I always like to bring this up when I'm talking to fellow dietitians that believe the only way we can get our nutrition is through whole foods, and believe me, the vast majority we can. It's a bit like omega-3s. Yeah, sure, theoretically we could afford to, if we had the money, know how to cook fish, choose the right fish and eat it every day, and then that would probably be a great thing. But it's not practical. People aren't doing it. And quite simply, very similar to K2, unless we're getting a very small and choice number of nutrients on a daily basis, omega-3s being the most researched nutrient, and K2 becoming also a very exciting nutrient in how we know it can reduce the risk of certain types of heart concerns and bone concerns, we can get it. Now, our company that I represent is called NattoPharma, and it's for a reason. The first word there,
is that a US-based company?
Yeah, yep. It's actually a Norwegian-based company,
okay.
But we also have offices around the world. And Natto is a relatively unpleasant Japanese food that's actually found in the north of Japan. And they actually found that there were these people that were living, and in fact, they had the highest rate of centenarians in the world. And also other people that were eating certain types of fermented cheese were getting high levels of K2 in their blood.
Okay.
So it's very hard to get K2, and that's why really supplemental and fortified approaches are becoming something that more and more supplement companies and food companies are considering.
Yep. So, Chris, are we consuming enough vitamin K2 daily in our diet? And the reason I want to ask you that, you mentioned omega-3 before in the diet. So if I wanted to get my omega-3 and I wanted to get my vitamin K2, planning my daily diet, how much fish am I eating? How much beef am I eating? Cheese, etc.
Yeah, so when it comes to omega-3s, you're needing to consume not just between about 120 and say 160 grams of fish. It needs to be the right fish, things like tuna, salmon, fish that's fatty.
Yep.
They're the ones that are going to give you enough. If it's other fish, things like tilapia, well, forget about it. You'd be consuming so many fillets of fish every single day just to get the omega-3s that you require. And that's why omega-3 supplements and omega-3 fortification in foods is becoming a really big trend.
Yeah, okay.
Now, if you think that's hard, well, K2 is even harder. There's only really one rich source of K2, and that's the North Japanese food called natto. It exists in extremely small numbers.
I haven't seen a lot of
actually-
meal plans here, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of it's very difficult to find. Now, if you wanted to get 45 micrograms of vitamin K2 daily alone,
Which is what your clinical studies are all based on, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, studies do start around 20,
Okay.
and then but as you get up to the very therapeutic level in the low hundreds, that's definitely where you get the even more powerful results.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the amount of say beef that you would need to consume every day would be 4 kilograms.
4 kilograms of beef.
Just beef. You need to have about 5 liters of milk to get that amount. 5 liters of yogurt, 140 grams or 8 yolks of egg, about 60 grams of hard cheese. And again, it's not just any hard cheese. You'd have to get the one that's got the fermentation process occurring to them. So it's really quite impossible to get what we have now shown and recreated in the science to be adequate amount of K2. There are very few nutrients that actually have the science that we see that is as compelling as omega-3s and in this instance K2, and for that reason K2 has really become one of the new poster childs of why supplementation is a very serious and really important thing for people in our society to take very, very seriously.
So what can I expect if I'm not supplementing vitamin K2? What are the adverse effects of this?
Yeah, the unfortunate thing about many underlying issues with cardiovascular disease, which is obviously one of the things that we really do take very seriously when it comes to giving people K2, is you're not really feeling the cardiovascular disease, the atherosclerotic lesions building up. It's nothing until you have the heart attack or you have the ischemic event where tissues in your body aren't getting enough oxygen. That's really the first time you're sensing, wow, I might be deficient. For bone health, I mean, obviously having a higher risk of tendency to fracture bones. We know in children, for instance, that children with low levels of K2 have a much higher risk of fracturing their bones just in the playground. So
how are kids getting vitamin K2? Because, I mean, they're not eating a lot of fermented cheese. They're not having 4 kilos of steak, and they may go close on some days to 5 litres of milk, but I don't think that's something mum would throw out there that often.
No, exactly. So and the great thing about K2 is it's applicable to all age groups. All age groups of athletes, all age groups of individuals who are young or getting older, and they want to protect their bones so they can not break their bones and have fractures and injuries, and they can continue to perform well. But the benefit is, the bonus is, at the same time, you're getting clearer arteries that are less stiff, that you may not feel, but you don't really want to feel the extreme atherosclerotic development, because that's going to be a heart attack.
No, that's the big one. None of us want that.
No, exactly. And again, athletes, should be as concerned about atherosclerosis and arterial stiffness than anyone, because of the fact that deficiency it runs so rife in our society.
So are we caught up here with the processed food boom that's happening as well? I mean, is that obviously, if you're talking arterial stiffness and you're talking blood flow, vitamin K2 is going to assist people whose diet may not be where it needs to be.
Correct, exactly, yeah. That appears to be from a lot of the clinical trials, and now we very regularly, and that's what really gets us excited when we're selling it to the average consumer. They are getting that benefit. So,
just off track, we've put 45 micrograms in triandrobol, which is what a lot of your research was based on, because we like to put a research level in there.
Yep.
Why would I put that, and that's probably a silly question come from me because I formulate it, why would I put that in a therapeutic product aimed at assisting males with testosterone boosting? Not testosterone, I'm talking within natural.
Yeah, the exact mechanisms by which any of the menaquinones and even the CoQ10s could have an effect on our testosterone level isn't very well known.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's very much more elucidations of what kind of proteins might also need to be activated by K2 to potentially allow our body to not just produce more testosterone, but to have it around and that where it actually has our effect on us. And I think this really touches on a broad topic from having more testosterone for just a sense of well-being, sexual wellness and these kind of things, all the way through to just being a better athlete. Because MENQ7K2, as a part of the, as that vitamin K2, also has been shown to assist in how each cell deals with free radicals. Now, if our body, if our cells, tissues, and organs aren't dealing with free radicals, it's affecting how that cell may metabolize testosterone. It also may prevent testosterone from exerting its beneficial effects to give you more energy, more strength, and actually feel really, really well. Now, another thing that people do find where they may be getting the benefit for this reason as necessarily testosterone effect is the fact that vitamin K2, the molecules are very weird, very long molecule. And it's specifically been developed by bacteria in the natto food and the cheese food in a specific way. And the way in which the structure works is when the body consumes that, it gets incorporated into our mitochondria in our cell.
Yep.
Now, the mitochondria is the energy house of the cell. That's where you're going to get effects of testosterone, CoQ10, and these type of things. And what K2 does is it works as a way of absorbing energy, so that the body can metabolize, produce ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is our energy currency of the body in every cell. So it really can have a profound effect on how you are feeling beyond just bone health and heart health. It's also very, very important that if for athletes, if you are taking or you're using certain types of steroids, this includes both anabolic steroids as well as corticosteroids. And when you think about it, how many times does an athlete take a corticosteroid across the counter because they've got an injury or they want to speed up the healing process? Unfortunately, most steroids will further increase calcification. We don't want the calcification to occur. And so for those people that are especially taking therapies for whatever medical personal reasons there are, there could be some additional reason for why they need to add K2 to their diet.
Interesting. So that potential poor cardiovascular health that you're talking about, it develops over decades. How long are we taking the MENQ7K2 before we actually start to see some results, or before we start to go, okay, I'm out of the grey area here, and I'm adding, what was it, 9% per 10 micrograms per year?
Yep.
So,
yeah, it's a very good question, and again, the studies were done on mostly postmenopausal women in this instance. And
can I ask, why did you pick postmenopausal women to do that study? Because obviously we're talking about a test booster here at the moment, and we just talked about steroids, and we've talked about a whole lot of things, and now we're going to talk about postmenopausal women in research.
Yeah, it's interesting, but it gives you a model to prove a concept around. And when women start to enter into their postmenopausal period, their incidence of heart disease overtake men.
Okay,
so
wow.
Actually, approximately 3 out of every 5 people are female dying from heart disease. So it is really important that we focus on that we focus on the majority of people who are actually dying of heart disease. So it was deliberately chosen because that's a needy population, and we still believe that it could be highly applicable to many other individuals. It's a simple biochemical pathway in the body. When you have ample K2, remember most of us are highly deficient in K2, they are also markers. Also from a population standpoint, epidemiological standpoint, where we're looking at societies, how they eat, what's statistically significant in their diet and how it's related to their health outcomes. Then you bring in the other part of the population. These aren't intervention trials, but they still are very powerful at establishing what may be key in certain dietary patterns to achieve the outcomes that we want. And some of these studies have literally occurred in 12 or so weeks that we've actually noticed not only improvements in calcification, but lowering and reduction in the promotion of a more of an elastic vessel, so that the blood can be flowing really, really well.
So how long would I if I'm a 50-year-old guy, I love training, I love having a bit of fun like everyone else does. My weekends are normally packed full of very social sides, so I'm not always on the best food plan, meal plan, we might say. How long am I on vitamin K2? And obviously it's, after talking to you, it's something I would like to take for the rest of my life. But how long am I on that before I'm actually making massive change, or I can go, you know what, I don't have that issue anymore?
Yeah, it can happen within a year or so, but most studies that really lend itself to the research along. I mean, the Rotterdam study that I mentioned in 2004 was done over 10 years, and that actually showed that those with the highest increase had 50% less incidence of death. You're not going to find many nutrients that are going to exert that benefit any quicker, but actually 10 years is pretty quick to lower your risk by a significant amount. You're still a young man, and when you're in your 60s, that's when you're going to reap the benefits and the reward of having the K2 in your diet. It's much the same as omega-3s and any of the other minerals and vitamins that we know are also important for their type of ailments and outcomes. So
if you did the Rotterdam study, is the one you mentioned, is that right?
Correct.
10 years, how many people are we talking about?
It was over 122 people. So it's a very nice sample size, and that's really why we were so excited about that when that research came out, because it was really one of the first times we could show incredible benefits that we believed were highly reproducible globally amongst most age groups, ethnicities, and gender, and that's why there are increased people now trying to get an RDI for K2. And because if more governments are saying to their people, you need to consume at least X amount of K2, that's going to set a standard that food manufacturers, supplement companies will have to live to. And it also gives more importance and acknowledges that the deficiency is not a good thing to be in, and we need to rectify it and turn that around.
That's incredible. So let's jump off the arterial stiffness for a while. Let's go back to the bone. I mean, we've hit the older, you've started talking about the older population again now, which is, so bone's a living substance, as I understand. Yep. It's comprised of a hard outer shell and a spongy inner tissue, like a matrix.
Yep.
So what is vitamin K2 doing there?
So at the inside the bone, so under your hip, where you actually have a lot of bone marrow, all right. In that part of the bone is where a lot of the magic happens in terms of how the entire bone is reformulated with more of the calcium, should I say? It's there where K2 has reacted and activated that protein called osteocalcin. And it's osteocalcin that does the job of making sure calcium is available in very easily to the tips and the head of the bone. And they're called the long bones. So your leg bones will have a greater tendency to have these being activated. That's where you will see the K2 have its effect.
So just throwing it under the bus, where you said in a 10-year study you can start to see some change within 12 months, even 3 months. How often is the bone remodeling itself that this is actually going to make a difference?
Yeah, the bone can remodel as much as several times a year, and it depends on what bone you're talking about. The bones that have more pressure and stress on them tend to remodel themselves a lot more quickly. And for the bone, there are definitely very well-known healthcare experts that are seeing a reduction in osteoporosis likelihood and outcome. The studies aren't as huge as the heart disease outcomes, but it's definitely suggesting why K2s are really, really important. And anecdotally, on a global basis, we hear from scores of healthcare professionals where they say the first thing they give an osteoporotic person, it's got to be K2. In fact, typically it should be not just calcium, but K2 and vitamin D, because vitamin D assists in the development of some of those proteins that have to become activated by vitamin K2 to do their job.
Interesting. So when did the world discover that vitamin K wasn't a single vitamin?
Yeah, it's been known for a number of years. In fact, vitamin K was discovered in 1929. K stands for coagulation, and that's why all of the molecules within the K family were given the name vitamin K. In a way, it's probably bad that we've lumped them both in because they do some similar things, but they also do some different things as well. Now, what K1 does is it activates proteins in the liver that control coagulation. Mm-hmm. K2 doesn't work. It works extrahepatically, so outside the liver, and that's where it exerts its benefits, and that's why it can work on reversing arterial stiffness when you're consuming adequate quantities of that for long enough, and where it can also be assisting in calcium being deposited in the bone.
It's really interesting. I'm amazed that everyone's not taking or supplementing it, and you don't. It's not one of those vitamins you hear people talk about.
No, it is, and unfortunately, when you look at some of the current RDIs, they're all lumped together, and in all K, it's approximately 90 micrograms a day. But they're not saying, well, of that, 2/3 or a certain amount should be K2 and a certain amount should be K1. Most people are first brought aware of K1 if they have a baby and the baby gets jabbed with some K1 because they want to make sure the baby is coagulating correctly after a birth.
Yep.
And then most people don't even think about it until more recently when a lot of the press has come off talking how positive the K2 is, and that there's a big difference between it and the amount that's in our body. When you consume K1 for an extended amount of time, you don't get the same prolonged increase in your serum that you get with K2. Now, the reason why we talk about MENQ7 K2 is there's two different types of K2 that's commonly available. Okay. MENQ7 K4 and the longer 7 form of K2. This has even greater long-term biological ability to do its job. The two primary things being to reduce arterial stiffness if not consumed in adequate quantities, and to support optimal bone health. So it's not only just getting the right K2 and getting K2 in general, it's making sure that you're consuming the most biologically active form of K2 so that it can be in your body and exert those positive benefits.
Interesting. Here's a challenge for you. We run 45 micrograms in our Triandrobol. Should I be taking one tablet in the morning, one at night, thinking about the vitamin K2 side, or should I be taking 2 in the morning, or how should it work?
I like to say, take it when you're going to remember.
Yep.
It's the sum total of how regularly and how good you are at doing it. Thankfully, it's a fat soluble vitamin, which means that the body does want to retain it quite well.
Yep.
So I would say if taking it twice in the morning or twice in your evening is making your day easier and you're going to be compliant, then do that. But hey, there are some people that do like to split up if they're taking a number of other supplements. They don't want to take too many at the one time, and they would split them up that way. Either or, it's hitting the amount that you're recommending, which in that product certainly has a very good amount to support the outcomes that we've been discussing today.
Perfect. Since we've been talking about older populations as well as fitness, is there any drugs or something I should be concerned about if I'm going to start supplementing with vitamin K2?
Yeah, listen. Yeah, well, we spoke about the anabolic steroids and the corticosteroids. One thing that we get a lot of questions about, and it's a little bit off topic, but I think important for people who may be taking these products are statin drugs. They're one of the most commonly prescribed statin drugs to actually lower cholesterol. And there are a lot of athletes that have high cholesterol that are taking this, and people just out in society are taking a lot of statin drugs. Well, they do a lot of things. They have a lot of side effects, and one of them is to have potential liver toxicity, which is not good. But one thing they do is they prevent your body from actually producing vitamin K2 in that long vitamin K2 MK7 form, as well as CoQ10. So what you're actually seeing now more than ever is people are developing supplements with the whole concept of energy feeling great. We know that when people take statin drugs, it lowers their CoQ10 levels, and they feel tired and lethargic. Well, the same thing happens to vitamin K2. MENQ7 K2 should also be supplemented so that people are feeling that they've got as much energy as possible. So there are definitely some very commonly used and prescribed drugs that need to be consumed. If you're bodybuilders or and so on, there's a big push now to make sure that you're consuming at least the amount that you have in your product up to higher levels, as well as having very high levels of vitamin D. And that appears to be a great blend. And again, not to beat that's the subject of omega-3s and K2, but they are such a great partner because we also know that in addition to making you feel good and as life insurance, knowing that it's protecting your arteries and supporting your bone health, you're actually feeling great and you have more energy all day. It is important that, athletes who have shown consistently high risks of bone injuries and bone fractures quite simply have the lowest levels of K2 when they're compared with other athletes that don't have that outcome. In fact, there was a study done of 16 collegiate athletes that actually showed that 15 out of the 16 had very low levels of K intake. All the athletes had very poor, low calcium intake, and that the 12 of those 16 were simply not consuming enough vitamin D. So again,
right?
If you're consuming them in a right way, you can get the benefit. It's very easy to assume that athletes are supposedly all really healthy, and I think from a bone and heart disease standpoint, they need to take their bone and heart health carefully and think about, well, what are the nutrients that they're probably going to be deficient in? We know that it's probably going to be K2 amongst many other nutrients, and that's really where our industry can challenge the assumption that we can get all of our nutrients from food only. There's many examples that are simply not possible.
Look, that's a very interesting vitamin you've talked about for the last 30, 40 minutes. Just in wrapping up, what's your big sentence to everyone to go, guys, let's consider the MENQ7 K2? Like, what is your saving grace here? I mean, you've talked about per 10 micrograms, 9% increase in. Yep. So, we're talking 45 is what you're putting. I mean, that's what do we have in here? We've got, 45. So we're talking 50% life-saving here. What are you going to throw out there? Let's get something bigger than that. Well, what do you got?
Exactly. I honestly can't come. I'm going to come up a bit short there for you. I'm sorry, but when you think that heart disease still kills more of us than it ever has, and it continues to be on the increase, and that certain types such as sudden cardiac disease, especially in athletes, is definitely something that they're not immune to, that itself is extremely compelling. I believe that we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of what vitamin K2 can do, because in addition to those particular proteins that I'd mentioned, that when they become activated, there's a host of other ones. So, for instance, we know certain types of insulin resistance and tendency to not manage your sugar levels very, very well could also be affected positively by K2. And what greater way of providing energy to an athlete's body than to have correct sugar level balance. And there's definitely many other outcomes that are still in their infancy, but we believe is a part of the reason why it's so important from a cardiovascular standpoint and bone health standpoint. And how paradoxical is it that we have one ingredient that outside our liver works on completely different organs? It supports the bone health, and it also supports cardiovascular health. And it's almost like a miracle nutrient in many ways. There isn't a single agent found from a pharmaceutical organization or a natural food organization that can reverse arterial stiffness the way we've found and shown in K2. And it is something to get really excited about because unfortunately, the majority of nutrition that we get from supplements can be obtained from food. And although some of them are extremely important, we really should be supplementing with the nutrients that we know are evidence-based that will deliver on their promise so that you have happy customers that are seeking far greater health outcomes.
No, it's amazing what your company's doing. And look, I want to applaud you for investing in research too. It's tough for a company to do that today when so many people can just jump on board and make any claim they want. And I just want to tell people MENQ7 K2 is the choice of Body Science. I want to thank you for being on today, and look forward to getting you back on soon to talk about some more interesting research you guys are up to.
Excellent. Thanks, Greg. Really appreciate being on, and all the best to your great work.
Thanks heaps. Today's podcast was brought to you by our partners in Fit, Happy and Healthy, ASN, Nutrition Warehouse, DY Discount Vitamins, Fat Burners Only, Evelyn Faye, Mr. Supplement, or find a retailer online at bodyscience.com.au/retailers.